Hello, I'm Frodo and this is Budget Deck Tech. Today we are going to focus on yet another guild mechanism, which is Surveil. Good for us, we can build pretty awesome deck with really cheap cards. Playing Dimir Surveil deck is mainly about making our opponent discard his stuff and fixing our draws with Surveil ability, which for us is better Scry, as we need to have cards in our graveyard. All of this helps us to control the board state and to finish the game in just few attacks in the late game. Let's see what we've got. In the deck we have two Surveil connected creatures, Footbone Phantasm and Dimir Spyback. These are our early game cards to cast. Phantasm provides us with pretty good blocker for early game, which grows, hopefully every turn, and curves out just great. Phantasm into Fort Erasure into Sinister Sabotage is a combination of cards that can just finish the game. It's a perfect scenario, so it won't happen too often, but it will from time to time. Dimir Spyback is slightly worse, but at least it provides us with evasive threat that will grow throughout the game. We include 4 copies of both Footbone Phantasm and Dimir Spyback in the decklist. Another creature we have is Bone Dragon. I know, for 5-drop slot, Doom Whisperer would be a lot better, especially in a Surveil deck. But we play budget decks here, and Bone Dragon is surprisingly decent. We plan to have as much cards in the graveyard as it's possible, so we should be able to return our Bone Dragon to the battlefield from time to time. Having an option to put a creature that we don't need now but will need some time later into graveyard is also pretty awesome, as we can surprise our opponents by casting pretty big flyer at the end of opponent's end step. I truly believe this card is worth playing. If Doom Whisperer is outside of your budget range, go for Bone Dragon. We have 2 copies of this card in the decklist. To control our opponent we need some counterspell and discard effects. As I said, curving out Fort Erasure into Sinister Sabotage is pretty awesome. These cards are really good. Fort Erasure can get rid of every non-land card in our opponent's hand. Every. Not only that, because we also get to Surveil, which is good by itself, but also pretty synergistic with the rest of our deck. Sinister Sabotage is a cancel with Surveil upside. Nothing really innovative to talk about. It is must-have in this list, as it not only deals with any spell our opponent would like to resolve, but also fixes our draws and grows some of our creatures. Another Survey spell we have are draw spells. We have 2 copies of Notion Rain, which is a terrific card. For just 3 mana we get to Surveil 2, draw 2, and sadly also lose 2 life. The last thing is one of the reasons we don't have full playset of it. The second reason is that we have too much 3 mana cards, so it was necessary to cut something. Maybe it's worth to cut something else and add more Notion Rains, but the deck does its job just as it is. The one we have full playset of is Discovery to Dispersal, which is Survey 2 draw card, really powerful in any deck, but most powerful with all these Surveil synergies. Next upside of this card is the dispersal side of it. Sometimes our opponent is left with the last single threat, no cards in hand, as we have pretty big amount of discard effects actually. So we can just get rid of the problem by bouncing it into our opponent's hand and make him discard the threat. Normally we use discovery side of the card, but dispersal might also come in handy. One of the most important things in our deck are enchantments. This information campaign is an engine of this deck. It helps us winning the race, as it always puts us 2 cards ahead. As opponents discard 1 card, we draw 1, and we can get this information campaign back into our hand by surveilling with other cards. And this is pretty much what the most of this deck does. This information campaign is great against control and mid-range decks, and sometimes it's helpful against aggro decks. Really great thing to play. Without it, all this surveilling stuff would probably not work. We include 4 copies of it in the decklist. The Eldest Reborn is another card that slows opponent down. Great against turn 5 Teferi. We get our opponent to sacrifice something, then discard, and with the ultimate step, we get to take something, most of the time from our opponent's graveyard, to finish the game with their card. If you can't buy yourself an expensive card, you might as well steal it with the Eldest Reborn. We have 2 of them in the decklist. The last non-land segment of our deck is removal. We have 3 copies of Fungal Infection and full playset of Prize of Fame. The most of people prefer playing Deathweight over Fungal Infection, which is a thing that I can't understand. Most of the time they do the same, as you can also block with the token to add up to this 2 damage. But firstly, sometimes you need just -1/-1 to remove some creatures, like Lanovolus, for example, which will leave you with Champ Blocker for some later threat. Secondly, it's instant speed. If you want, you can use Deathweight, but I think Fungal Infection is just a lot better. Price of Fame is tricky card, as it is 4 mana, but there are a lot of legendary creatures in the meta, and having Destroy Creature effect for 2 is pretty awesome. Still, the most important element of this card for us is Surveil 2, and 4 mana spell still fits pretty well into our curve, and I think it's worth playing, but it might be tricky, as I said. Anyway, we are all in on Surveil plan. In the mana base we have 4 Drowned Catacombs, 4 Dimir Guild Gates, 4 Watery Graves, 6 Islands and 5 Swamps. You might consider slotting in some Field of Ruin or removing Drowned Catacombs and Watery Graves, if you want the deck to be a lot cheaper. We don't really need these lands. With all the Survey we shouldn't have problems with fixing the mana base within just 2 colors. By cutting these lands you will make the deck half price cheaper. That is all you can find in the main deck. Now let's head to the sideboard. We have 2 copies of Duress against control and non-creature cards heavy decks. Having all the discard cards main board, I don't think we need more copies of Duress in the sideboard, but 2 copies should be there. 3 copies of Cast Down to add some cheaper removal to our deck. It's a decent price of Fame alternative. 2 copies of Disdainful Stroke against every deck that plays a lot of mana expensive cards. 3 copies of Negate against control decks and also token strategies. 3 copies of Essence Scatter against creature heavy decks, and 2 copies of Mephitic Vapors, mainly against token decks. You might consider Golden Demise or Ritual of Third instead of it, but I wanted to keep on the Surveil theme of the deck. As for non-budget upgrades, Doom Whisperer is an obvious one. A great card, 6/6 Flying Trampler for 5 is already pretty good card, but having an option to Surveil whenever we need would help us a lot. The last obvious card is Mission Briefing, which is actually pretty budget now, but I'm not really sure about this card in this deck. Anyway, buy it now because it is really cheap, and most of the time in Modern it's just better Snapcaster Mage, and I think I don't have to mention its price. Another cards that would be useful in this deck probably are Vraska's Contempt and Search for Escanta, but they don't really fit the theme, you see. Anyway, that is all for today. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If that is so, hit this like and subscribe buttons below. And see you soon!